Hello and welcome to the JCN Clinic Podcast show. I'm Jessica, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Tammy, who is our new clinical nutritionist at the JCN Clinic. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, Jessica. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm really pumped for this episode because whenever I have someone come on that I am really excited to get to know at a deeper level, because you and I obviously have had lots of chats, but the podcast is a way that we can really quickly dive into each other's brains in
Yes.
at another level. So I get really amped for them.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting conversation.
It will. So we're going to be talking about why, inverted commas, healthy women are struggling with their periods. And the reason I wanted to talk about this with Tammy is that she has such amazing knowledge when it comes to hormones, lots of other areas too. And even before we dive into this topic, I would love, Tammy, for you to just tell listeners about you, like who you are, your background, why you love clinical nutrition, just so they can get to know you and know the person behind that lovely smile.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually English. I'm originally from England, so a mix of accents. But I grew up in a house where chocolate and sweets were free flowing. We had sugary cereal for breakfast, cake for breakfast, sodas for drinks. My parents loved to get takeout. My mom was always starting a diet on Monday. So I had quite a messy relationship with food through my teenage years. It actually seems crazy to think about it now, but I actually believe that eating as little as possible was healthy. Like, that was a really deep belief of mine. And I was always following different diets that were in celebrity magazines. This was the 90s. So you can imagine the information that was being shared at that time. But my period started much later than everybody else. And they were very irregular. I was going to doctors. I was diagnosed with IBS at one point. I was diagnosed with PCOS at another point. And I was given the oral contraceptive pill to just manage what was going on. And I felt awful on the oral contraceptive pill. I didn't last long on it. I had mental health issues with that, felt really depressed, which is very common. And then eventually I found my way into a yoga class. And this was like the late 90s, early 2000s. So yoga wasn't the gym yoga that we see a lot today. It really allowed me to connect more deeply with my body, to question beliefs that I have, and to kind of let go of some control patterns around food. And then fast forward a few years, I was working in the fashion industry in Los Angeles, which is the mecca of, health and wellness and organic, yummy food. And I was just meeting so many amazing women who were just absolutely gorgeous, had the perfect bodies, but were really not happy with themselves. They had issues around food. They were obsessively working out. And I was going to fashion shows and just thinking about how I wanted to feed the models rather than look at the clothes. And I started to just really question, like, what's going on here? Why are so many people just struggling with food and body image? So I did a health coaching course with the Institute for the Psychology of Eating and became an eating psychology coach, which was absolutely amazing, and further transformed my own relationships and own beliefs, and even judgments that I had towards my family and their eating behaviors, which was actually really, really interesting. But then a lot of the women that I was seeing then had hormonal issues, of course. And so then I went back to do a health science degree in nutrition. And here I am now, super passionate about women's hormones, fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, the whole shebang. Yeah.
I love your story and lead up to clinical nutrition. I feel like it's very unique. Like, there's aspects of it. You speak to so many practitioners that have their own health issues or something that's kind of brought them and led them to like alternative medicine in some way, whether it's nutrition or naturopathy. I think that's common, but I love that you had this whole like other life and career where, just it was such an eye opener around things like, already something that was such a big thing for you, but like relationships with food and body image. And I love just that you were going into that space, or just your thought pattern around, I just want to feed everyone. I want to feed everyone nourishing, amazing food.
Well, it's really interesting because I came across a study just recently, and it was something like 53%, I might be inaccurate with that figure, but it was something like 53% of women having fertility treatment have had a past or current eating disorder.
Wow.
And haven't told their doctors about it. So I feel like people's relationship with food and disordered eating, when we're talking about binge eating, chronic dieting, orthorexia, it has such a huge component to the menstrual cycle, menstrual health, women's hormones. And so it usually comes up somewhere in the session, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's such an asset too that you have, having had that former training, and it's obviously something that just stays with you. I know when we first connected, I was like, oh, that'd be such a magnificent like tool that you have in your toolbox to help so many clients, because it is rife. Like, it's whether people know that they have issues in that area versus like the subconscious behavior. Like, it's very, very rife. Yeah. And you're a mum too. That's something we should tell people.
I'm a mum, which I guess has really enhanced my passion for supporting women in that space, because I've been through it. Got 2 kids, a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy, who are just the most beautiful people. So feel very lucky. Yeah.
Oh, love it. Well, let's dive into the topic. So, as we said, we're going to be talking about why women, particularly, I thought, just to explain more about this topic too, like the concept of inverted commas, why healthy women are struggling with their period, is that a lot of our listeners are interested in health, like they're already engaged in looking after themselves at all different sorts of capacities. A lot of them already coming to the clinic or interested in the clinic. I think it's rarer that there are listeners that aren't sort of interested in their health in some way. So, and I think that again is really common, that people are like, particularly women, are trying to do what they can for their health, but still like wondering like why, like what is going on. So I thought first and foremost, it would be helpful for listeners that we talk about like, what does healthy menstruation mean? Like, particularly with your hat on as a clinical nutritionist, like what does that mean to you? Which I know is actually a really big question, but let's just dive into that one, hey?
Yeah, well, I think first we need to look at the whole menstrual cycle, rather than just menstruation as a standalone event. And really thinking about the menstrual cycle as the 5th vital sign. So in the same way that blood pressure or heart rate tells us something important about overall health, the menstrual cycle is that monthly report card. It tells us like a huge amount of what's happening hormonally, nutritionally, and also emotionally. So a healthy cycle is typically between 25 to 35 days. The bleed lasts around 4 to 7 days, and the blood should be a healthy red color, not brown. It should be pretty clot-free, or, tiny clots if there are any, and also not very light. So a healthy period should as well be like largely pain-free, which many people don't realize. Some people think, oh, it's normal to have menstrual pain. But the healthy menstrual cycle has 4 distinct phases. So we've got the menstrual phase, which is the bleed. And I like to think of that as the time to kind of rest, to go within, to slow down. The follicular phase, which is the first approximately 14 days after the bleed starts. And that's where estrogen starts to rise. And people will notice there's a natural increase in energy at that time. Then there's ovulation, which is where estrogen peaks and LH surge triggers the release of an egg. We can think of that as the energetic peak of the cycle. And then the luteal phase, which is where progesterone rises to prepare the uterine lining for potential implantation. And that's, again, where energy starts to slow down and turn inwards, and the body maybe needs more warmth, again, maybe more rest, maybe more complex, nourishing foods, and maybe even more emotional support.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. I was thinking, I actually thought for a minute when you're talking about the nourishing foods and you were like, and maybe more, I thought you were going to say chocolate or something like that. But no,
oh yeah, because
nourishing mental
magnesium.
support. Yes.
Well, they do. They need the magnesium, and what better source than dark chocolate?
Yeah. No, wonderful. So that gives everyone a really clear idea of love that you've broken that down, like obviously menstruation itself, but all of the different phases as well. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. It is actually amazing how many women aren't aware of what their menstrual cycle entails and those different phases. Even today, there's still a lot of women that just aren't aware of what that should look like. I also like too that you said right at the start about like the bleed itself, like as a cycle, that sort of 25 to 35 day window, because I do see a lot of women who also, like, once they start educating themselves with their cycle, they get super fixated. I don't know if you see that. Like, they get super fixated on the concept of like a 28-day cycle on the dot, and then like get really anxious if like it happened to come, you know, a day earlier than normal or a day later, or like, just this concept of like the perfect 28 days. And obviously there's multiple factors like as to what line up with what your cycle looks like to you. But do you see that where women like also get really fixated on like the concept of like the 28-day cycle?
Definitely in terms of like fertility, people can get really fixated because that's when they really start tracking. But I think what's important to remember is that there is variety in the length of days, and as long as it's normal 1 or 2 days for you, then it's when it's really a concern when you're used to having, say, a 30-day cycle and then it suddenly goes to 35 days. So then it's like, okay, what's happening then? So as long as it's around, your normal is consistent, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I love that. So another big question, like obviously that gives people context of the cycle, but why do you think so many women who are trying to do the right thing, look after themselves and eat healthy, etc., why do you think so many women are struggling with their menstrual cycle?
I think there are a few different reasons. Chronic stress being one of them. Poor diet. We're just surrounded by fast and processed foods. Blood sugar imbalances, insulin resistance, which obviously is one of the main drivers of PCOS. Increased exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals, because all of those will cause some degree of inflammation within the body. So, for example, chronic stress will disrupt the menstrual cycle by increasing cortisol, which then will inhibit reproductive hormones, and it could lead to irregular, delayed, missed, or absent periods. And also, I think, as you said, many women have just never been taught what a normal cycle looks like. They haven't had much education around like the hormonal changes that happen or the 4 phases of the cycle. And we're not really taught, as I was saying before, like to slow down in the luteal phase or to rest in the menstrual phase. And I often see if there is already, a lot of inflammation, a lot of chronic stress, if you're not living in a kind of more cyclical way with your menstrual cycle, that then exacerbates the symptoms, because we're not men. Like men, their hormones don't change week to week. You know, it's very linear, whereas ours do change. And I think it can be really helpful to know that, and then for people to check in with actually how are their energy levels today? What phase of the menstrual cycle are they in? Do they need to work out a little bit differently? Do they need to say no to social plans? Do they need to eat a little bit differently? I think as a culture, we're taught to kind of push through. Like even the other day I was driving and I saw an advert on the back of a bus. It was for Modi Body, the period underwear, which I love. I absolutely love that brand. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But the advert was for teenage girls, and it was a picture of a girl playing sport, and the text on the advert was saying no more period FOMO. And I just thought to myself, you know, we're just still really pushing this idea on young girls to keep going during the period, just, you know, and we, you know, studies show that when you're bleeding, your estrogen and progesterone are at its lowest, there's more room for injury because you don't have that estrogen to protect the bones. So I think this all ties in that we're just living in a culture that doesn't allow us to really listen to the symptoms that our body's saying throughout the month. And then this will then build up and cause more PMS, for example, because of all the factors that I said at the start. Does that make sense?
It so does. Yeah, it really does. And I think it's so important. I love that you've highlighted that. So, yeah, with so much context, because I totally agree. Like we do live in a culture that is particularly for women. Like, I mean, I know it's like multifactorial across all genders as far as like, you know, westernized world, like just go, achieve. But I feel like women, as like another layer, women are just so driven in general, and always, I feel like, put them, particularly with, you see it with mums, like a lot of like putting yourself at the bottom of the pile, but there's just like, there's so many depleting factors, and it's just like push, achieve. And yeah, it's not with any thought at all to their menstrual cycle. And then every woman is different within that, because you do have some women who, I guess maybe that's where it gets confusing too, and she'll talk about it, but like there are some women who might feel absolutely pretty good in their luteal phase compared to, say, maybe how someone else feels, and like what that looks like as far as like rest for them, but I feel like that in its own right can get confusing too, but for sure.
And I think I think if it's working for you and you don't have any period, it's just keep doing what you're doing, right? This is more of a conversation for someone that's having menstrual issues. But just as a side note, I'm also a yoga teacher. I've taught yoga for almost 20 years, and I did a training in women's yoga. It's kind of moving with the moon, moving in accordance to your menstrual cycle. And that was really, really, really profound when you actually, because often we think about, okay, yoga will be great to do in the luteal phase and maybe like the HIIT and the CrossFit or whatever in the follicular. But actually, when you even look at yoga and the different poses that support the different phases of the menstrual cycle, it's really quite profound, and how it can really change your whole being and your emotional health and your mental health. You know, in this training, we were in a group of women up in Byron Bay, and everybody's periods started syncing up to each other. And this is, again, it's like being in community with other women is actually really supportive for your hormonal health. It's so interesting.
Yeah, that must have been fascinating. I kind of like, Carissa would eat that up. She loves stuff. It's kind of like a very much her world at the moment. She'd love to, I know, hear more about that from you. But yeah, I know I haven't, unfortunately don't get to do as much yoga classes these days with where I live, but I've had some amazing teachers in the past, and who have been just very conscious of factors as far as like, okay, if you're menstruating right now, don't do this pose, or if you're doing, or modify in this particular way, but definitely have not had that across the board. But it's truly such an important and interesting point with respect to like just how we just push all the time. I know I'm bad for it. Like I find, like, particularly even just with training that I do, like if there's a race on a certain day or something that's a priority for me, like that race isn't going to move. So like I'm still like set on like, well, I've got to get this training done. Or, I have unfortunately a really bad luck streak of races falling on my period, and I just don't understand why it keeps happening. And it's just like, I know this is so not ideal and my body does not want to do this today, and I'm really sorry, body, but I can't move the date. But you feel
that's exactly the point, right? Life's not going to change, and sometimes we can't move the dates, and we have to work with what is presented to us. If you've got a meeting, there's a beautiful book, The Optimized Woman by Miranda Gray, and she talks about actually scheduling and eating your life, and eating in a way that is in sync with your menstrual cycle, but scheduling meetings in a way that's syncing to your menstrual cycle. So it's very interesting, but it's all very practical, especially for mums when you can't just stop and rest because you've got kids to run after. And so then it's about knowing which phase of your cycle you're at, because a lot of women don't. Sometimes the period just my period's late this month. I didn't even know it was coming, or it surprised them because they're just, weeks go really fast and they're not tracking. But when you know and you keep track of the stage that you're at, even if there's a race, or even if there's a big meeting, or even if there's a big event in your life, you don't have to move away or stop doing those things. But how can you then support yourself around that? So maybe you do a big race, but then you have an earlier night, or you have, making sure you're getting warm soups and easy digestible foods. For example, making sure you're getting enough magnesium and B vitamins at that time, and your omegas. Maybe you're making sure you're getting some fatty fish around that time to really support. Maybe you do some more warm baths, magnesium salt baths, or things like that. So just having things in place that okay, this is the phase I'm at. Life's not going to stop, but these are the things I can do to just support me in that time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in a way, it's about being kinder to yourself, isn't it? By understanding like where you're at in your cycle and what you're asking of yourself, but then what can I do to support this, is fundamentally being kinder to you, which then is like more of that positive feedback loop. It's not that more what I would think of more of a negative space that we can get into, which is like, I've got to do all the things. Why aren't I performing? Why aren't I at my best?
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially around mental health, right? Because people will say, I've just been so angry and then my period came, It's like, well, if you knew that before, you could have just been a little bit kinder to yourself, because you knew you'd be feeling a little bit more emotional at that time. How can you support that, So just having that awareness, really.
I feel like this next question is quite similar, but maybe it's just picking out some of the standout points. But what are the common drivers of menstrual irregularities that you see? So we've definitely touched on quite a lot there, but I guess it's like, are there some absolute standouts that you see that are really strong drivers that create this dysregulation?
So I mentioned many of them, but I can go into a little bit more detail. So inflammation is really, really huge. It's really at the heart of painful periods, because prostaglandins, which is the hormone-like compound that triggers uterine contractions in menstruation, they're produced in much higher quantities when the body is in an inflammatory state. So, eating a more anti-inflammatory diet, making sure there's adequate fiber, omegas, just to really support inflammation, like moving away from refined sugars and those inflammatory fats, making sure there's enough vitamin D, and then also supporting chronic stress, which is its own inflammatory cascade in itself. And then the second, I guess, would be like estrogen dominance or impaired estrogen clearance, or when estrogen is high relative to progesterone. Again, this is going to create heavy periods. It will make conditions like endometriosis worse. So if there's impaired clearance of estrogen through the gut and the liver, we can also see like disruption in the gut microbiome, and it just means the estrogen's not broken down and cleared efficiently, and it accumulates. And then again, it, as I mentioned before, it amplifies the prostaglandin production, thickens the uterine lining, and creates this heavy, painful, clotty period. Chronic stress is really huge and a main driver that I see in most women, because cortisol suppresses the hormonal signals, as I mentioned before. And insulin resistance and blood sugar dysregulation. It's really, really common with PCOS or without PCOS. But when blood sugar is unstable, then insulin rises. That's going to drive androgen production, which elevates testosterone, can cause irregular cycles. It's the acne picture, or the hirsutism, the excess hair growth. So stabilizing blood sugar through regular meals, adequate protein, healthy fats, choosing complex carbohydrates, eating regularly, not skipping meals. Basic nutritional principles can really support your menstrual cycle. And also nutritional deficiencies make the conditions worse, especially women who are coming off the pill can really struggle with nutritional deficiencies. Main ones like magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, B vitamins, especially B6 and B12. All of those things can be drivers for making your menstrual cycle worse.
How often do you see clients over the years that it really comes first and foremost down to like having poor diet, like as being like the main underlying driver? I was just there when you were talking about like skipping meals, and I guess it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with your history and what you've seen in other capacities. But yeah, how often do you see where it is actually like, wow, this person's food is really the underlying factor that needs to be treated as such, and that's it, versus like needing to dive in deeper?
There's usually a combination of things going on, but what I see is a lot of women doing completely low carbohydrate diets, and that can really, really mess up the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle. So women that have maybe had pre-existing menstrual irregularities and then do a low or no carbohydrate diet end up with worse symptoms. So then there's and then you've got to slowly bring back the carbohydrates, because otherwise there'll be quite a significant weight gain after that. But then I also see women who don't eat enough healthy fats, and so that can be quite an easy fix once they understand the types of good fats to add in. That can really, especially when there's missing periods or delayed periods for no other reason than not enough calories, focusing on adequate fats can really be supportive.
For sure. Definitely too. I was thinking when talking about sort of like in the 90s era, sort of think of clients that I see. I guess it's sort of they're getting a different age bracket now, but such a fear around fats, and just seeing clients like it's definitely shifted to like this whole low carb space, but I think there's still a significant portion of like, or an age bracket of females that have like this fundamental fear around fats,
especially in the over 35 women.
Right. I wanted to talk, we're definitely going to talk more about like approaches to treatment, and like there's lots of, you've already dropped some really lovely nutritional nuggets already. But before we do that, I was really curious to talk a little bit about social media, because I feel like there's a lot of like hormone hacks. There's a lot out there. I mean, it's like this with anything with health, yeah, with social media, like everyone's got their 2 cents. But I feel like hormones, like with the rise of like attention around perimenopause and menopause, and there's been a lot around, definitely around the menstrual cycle and training in the cycle. I'm really curious, and you and I haven't even chatted about this, but I was curious about like your thoughts on like what you see, and anything, you had to say about certain maybe trends that you say, or just, in general, like, because I find it fascinating.
I don't spend that much time on social media, and I don't engage in a lot of, like, I just kind of move past it, because there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of confusion, and then there's a lot of quote unquote experts saying very different things, and it can get very, very complicated and very, very confusing. But there are some things that I think people are saying that are moving people more back to natural rhythms, which I think are really good. Like, I've seen people like encouraging brushing your teeth outside in the morning, which I think is lovely. And in terms of hormonal health, I think seed cycling is a really big trend that's coming up on social media. There was a study published last year, a systematic review about the success of seed cycling for PMS and polycystic ovaries. So I think if people are wanting to try that, that's great. The studies were small and there's no follow-up. And so I think the thing about these kind of hacks are it's that may be useful, but it's never usually that's the only fix that you're going to need, right? So it's like, well, yes, you can do the seed cycling and that may be beneficial, but you most likely will need other support as well. The thing about social media that worries me, and I see this a lot with clients, is the self-prescribing. Because there's so many supplements now being marketed for menstrual and hormonal support, fertility, for mums. And I have seen many clients come to me self-prescribed and are taking too much of a certain nutrient, B6 being one of them. I had a client come and she was on so many different supplements, protein powders that had B6 in it. Her B6 levels were like 200 and something. Like, it was really, really high. I've also seen people make their menstrual cycle very irregular by being on ashwagandha or Vitex when it actually wasn't indicated for their presentation. So I think people need to be really careful with following hacks or influencers on social media, because it is very overwhelming and very confusing. And I think if they do want to try a specific supplement, they should definitely speak to a practitioner, whether that's right for their actual presentation.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think if anyone is promising like something that sounds so simple, like the concept, I guess, of a hack, like just do this, just take this, just do this, like what we've talked about today and what you've explained so well is like, this is complex. As you said, like even when I asked you about diet, you're like, well, usually it's one aspect. Like this is a complex space. And if anyone is touting like just one thing to help you just solve everything, like see a red flag around that, because maybe, some people don't come, I like to think people don't come from a place of where they're trying to do harm, like they're trying to help, and maybe they've made this one change and it's been like this miracle for them, and that's great. But then like shouting that from the rooftops that like everyone else needs to do that is really problematic. And I think if you're seeing advice online, like if it's coming from someone that is explaining it within context of like, this is complicated and there's other factors involved and we need to treat you as an individual, then like that is the sound advice that you want to be taking or listening from. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that social media in a way has also been really great to invite conversation, and especially around perimenopause. These weren't conversations that people were having in the past, and people are now more aware of symptoms and that those symptoms aren't necessarily normal and that they should maybe look into them. But I do also think that because people are sharing so much on social media that now, and I see this a lot in group, like for example, Facebook groups. I'm in some mums groups and people will say, I'm feeling this, and then everyone's like, it's perimenopause, it's perimenopause, it's perimenopause. And I'm like, not really the first place I would go. I can kind of see there's some other stuff happening. Let's not blame everything on perimenopause.
Yes. That's that's huge, because it has become such and I totally agree. Like, it's wonderful that women are taking ownership and they're understanding their hormones at this time of their life, and there is a lot of information out there. Like, it's so good to see, but it's just it's become like the catchphrase of like your why, like, oh, like everything's like it's peri. It's like, well, it's not that simple. Like, and as you said, like it could be these other factors, like it absolutely could be, or a supplement, again, as you said, like every woman, every client that you see, she's just like, what about creatine? Like, should I be taking creatine? Like, it's just, and again, it's like that's that simple. Like, you take this one supplement and it's going to fix all of your problems. It's just like, I remember working, I should be careful with how I say this, but like with someone interested in making a supplement who wanted like a nutritionist's advice. And when I was talking to them, I'm like, well, you can't, in my eyes, like, you can't just create one supplement. Like, there isn't just like one supplement for women with period problems. I like, oh, we want this one for period problems, we want this one for gut issues. It's like, but like, it doesn't work like that. Like, there isn't just one supplement. And they're like, no, but that's what we want. And it was just like a real lock heads of where I'm like, well, I don't think that I can really help you because it doesn't, I like the integrity of that just rubs me the wrong way. But unfortunately, again, like, that's what sells. It's like, well, here's a product and it says PMS support or something to that, like on the front, and or like peri support, and that's what sells.
And that's exactly what I see in clinic. And going back to what I was saying before, in that I've worked with clients who have just made their cycle much more regular by taking a PMS support that had Vitex in it that is just not indicated in her specific presentation. And I think it's really interesting that you bring up creatine, because everyone is talking about creatine at the moment and how it's absolutely the best supplement for everyone. But there are a few bits of research coming out about maybe, and it hasn't been proven yet, but maybe it's not indicated in endometriosis. And the thing is that it takes a woman with endometriosis a really long time to get a diagnosis of endometriosis. And often they don't know that they've got endometriosis. So I do think we also need to be careful with just supplementing something because everybody's saying everyone should be taking that. We don't have the research. We don't have enough research into every hormonal condition, especially when people aren't getting the right diagnosis.
Yeah. I feel like you and I could probably talk about this alone for another hour, easy. But I think it's a really important topic, and I'm sure that just even that alone has been helpful for listeners. Because
it also goes back to the idea that it's just, everybody wants a quick fix. And you can't out supplement a quote unquote bad diet or stress lifestyle. You have to start with the foundation. And then look at the supplements, and only taking the supplements that are necessary.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think there's only a certain percentage of people that want to do that extra work that is involved, because like the quick fix is super appealing. Like that's what in their mind, it's just like, well, that's what I've got time for, or that's all I can dedicate space for, as opposed to like diving deeper. And sometimes some of those, which I guess we'll get into next as far as treatments, it's like sometimes some of those treatment areas can be confronting in their own right, because as you've mentioned, chronic stress is just so rife when it comes to hormones. And treating stress, like I feel like after decades in clinic, I'm like, oh, that's just always the hardest area. Like it's hard because it's life. It's like people's actual life that you're trying to create change in, and trying to create these like pockets of time. But yeah, let's speak to that. So tell me about just some of those areas for you as far as your approach to treatment through, I know I said like at the lens of clinical nutrition, but I feel like for you there's other avenues as far as experience that you would pull on here.
Yeah, and just to firstly say, like I get it, I'm also a mum, a working mum, and I get, life is busy, and so quick fixes are very, very appealing. But that's why in clinic we always try and make it workable, and we're working with the patient to give protocols and treatment plans that kind of work with their lifestyle, rather than giving a treatment plan that's just not going to fit into their lifestyle. But, when I'm working with a client, I'll do a really comprehensive case study. If it's somebody coming for menstrual support, I'll look at the history of her cycle from the very first period, really understanding, what happened, and looking at her relationship with food, as I began speaking about that at the beginning, looking at her stress picture, her sleep, her digestion, her energy, her mood, but the mood and energy across all 4 phases of the cycle. So, where are PMS symptoms coming up? What's happening in the follicular phases? Maybe draining all your energy that you don't have any reserves left for the second half of the cycle. And then I might use some functional testing. I like the dried urine sample, dried urine test, which can see hormones across the cycle or just in the luteal phase. That could often be really useful, especially if there's maybe some estrogen blockages, that the liver's not clearing estrogen efficiently. That can really show that. I might want to see some nutrient or vitamin levels, if there are deficiencies in iron or zinc or vitamin D. That's useful to know to then make a more informed treatment plan. And also gut, we haven't spoken about this, but but gut health, digestion plays a massive role in hormonal health. We know that a disrupted gut microbiome can significantly complicate that hormonal picture. One example is if somebody's suffering from constipation or infrequent bowel movements, that might lead to estrogen not being cleared efficiently. Then that's leading to estrogen dominance, and it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of that estrogen driving inflammation. So there may be different areas to check within a person to really get a holistic view of what's happening for them. But then I'll always start with a nutritional foundation, because as I said, no supplement protocol is going to fix that if those foundational principles are not there. So again, we're looking at, is the woman getting sufficient protein? Is there sufficient healthy fats and sufficient carbohydrates to produce the hormones, right? It may be they need to increase dietary fiber, vegetables, legumes, whole grains. Maybe they need to add some fermented foods. And as I was mentioning before, like supporting the liver through cruciferous vegetables. That's usually one of my favorite protocols. Bitter greens, very obvious one, making sure they're drinking enough water to support that liver clearance, and reducing the burden of alcohol if they're a big drinker, and maybe looking at processed food intake, reducing that. What can it be replaced with in a very doable way?
Yeah, they're all great. I'm curious with the whole stress side of things,
Yes.
like, and I totally appreciate this isn't something can just be summed up in like a few sentences, but um yeah, I'm just curious if you've got any sort of, whether it's, we call them tips or just things that stand out to you, like when you're working with women who are dealing with chronic stress, and obviously that comes in all different packages, but like, yeah, like how do you approach that? Or are there ways that you'll like start to try and like unpack that with a client, or particular ways that you'll start to try and break that stress down in some capacity? Because I appreciate it's really, really hard.
Yeah. So it's very typical, especially with mums, because their days are very, very full and there's not any time for themselves at all. Just to even, it's like, yeah, I can do the nutrition, I can do the exercise, I can do the supplements, but the rest, what does that, for a lot of women, it's like, what does that even look like? What does that even mean? And I think a good place to start is boundaries. It's like, what's your relationship like with boundaries? Are you somebody that says yes too much and takes on too many things? And where can you say no? Where can you delegate a little bit more? Where can you ask for help? I think women often need to be willing to ask for help a little bit more, maybe from their partner or for their family or from friends. And then looking at little ways that you can add some nervous system support incrementally throughout the day. Does it mean you just need to get outside a little bit more throughout the day? Like, so if you're working in an office, can you just, every hour, just go out for 5 minutes or take a walk around the block just to kind of decompress a little bit? Can you learn, and it's not an easy one, but to breathe, because most people forget to breathe. And so, and it doesn't need to be this big, like 20-minute breathing exercise. It's just, can you just take 5 to 10 breaths before you eat, just to, reset the nervous system so that you're eating in a calm way. In that rest and digest response, your body's able to digest and assimilate a little bit better. Do you need to just journal 5 minutes before bed so that you can go to bed with a clear mind? Can you bring sleep even 5-10 minutes earlier? Can you just, even when you're putting your kids to sleep, can you lay with your legs up the wall for 3 minutes, 2 minutes? It's like trying to get it in the day, not as an add-on separate thing, because a lot of people don't have the time. And then when you start, and you can habit stack, right? It's like thinking about, okay, I'm cleaning my teeth. As I'm cleaning my teeth, I'm going to take 5 breaths. So then it becomes a habit that you're just doing at the same time, and it's not an extra thing that you need to do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I hadn't even thought of the legs up the wall while you're putting the kids to bed. That's such a good one. But they're all really, really helpful. And I know, I appreciate, like, they change for each person. Like, when you're working with clients, like, everyone's life looks different, but what we're trying to do is find those places that we can inject that little bit of time, and that it feels reasonable. Like, we're not asking you to, obviously we'd love you to go and do a yoga class or something of the like, but that's just not realistic for a lot of people. So it's like, where can you find those little spaces? I do find that late evening is such a classic one, because it's, again, particularly for parents, it's like kids are finally in bed and it's like time where you feel like it's your time, and all you want to do is just relish in the fact that you've got your time. But then that becomes like bedtime pushed out further, because realistically it's kind of like, well, it'd be ideal if I went to bed within the next hour, because I'm going to get my ideally 8 hours sleep. But it often gets pushed out because it's like, well, I just want to sit on the couch and I want to like watch a show by myself and have a cup of tea and have a bit of chocolate. And then like, suddenly it's 11 o'clock and I feel like that's one where, like you, I'm like always trying to steal a little bit of time back. But you can't just
and
like take someone straight from 11 o'clock to like 9 o'clock. It's like, okay, as you said, it's got to be in increments.
Yeah. And it's tricky. But I think education around why the decline is really important. What's happening hormonally by having that 11 o'clock bedtime. And again, if you're doing that 11 o'clock bedtime and you don't have any issues and your health is perfect, great. We're speaking to the women that are chronically stressed, having difficult periods, maybe struggling to lose weight, then there's probably high leptin, which is then going to be causing high insulin. And so it's just some education around that often helps. And maybe getting up earlier, going to bed earlier and getting up earlier if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one other thing I would add for people listening who have a practitioner is also to be within reason of what you feel comfortable with, but to be open and honest with your practitioner about your stress. I just am thinking it's front of mind at the moment. I've had a few clients literally in the last week who have had some really intense life stress going on, and it's only been through a little bit more of open questions and like kind of pushing a little bit more that they have like opened up about what's going on in their life. And it's so important because as practitioners, if we don't know, like we can miss something, because like we understand that everyone's got stress because we live in a stressful world, but when you're going through significant stress in your life and we don't know that, and we're like thinking, well, what am I missing? Like, why is this happening? Like, am I not doing this right, or I don't need to adjust that? And then it's like, well, lo and behold, it's like, no, actually this person's going through some like 10 out of 10 chronic stress. Like that's significant. So like let us know, even if you don't want to tell us all of the itty bits and details. We're always here to listen, but like, I just think that's worth mentioning because that's been something I've seen a lot lately.
Yeah, it's really important to mention, and especially when we're talking about menstrual health, because often that, 10 out of 10 stress may delay your period, the bleed. Yeah. So, if we're not aware that that's happened, we will miss that that's the cause. So yes, that's a really important point.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Tammy? Anything that we've maybe missed or anything, that comes to mind? There may not be.
No, I just think if anybody, if anything that I've shared today resonates, maybe just explore living, eating in a more cyclical way. So, if you're just getting started with this, just slowing down in the luteal phase, coming up to the bleed, and just really allowing yourself time to rest, even in the bleed, even if that's going to bed half an hour earlier, but just giving yourself permission to slow down and then to check in, does that impact you through the rest of the month?
Yeah, no, very well said. This has been great. I've loved this chat and I just feel like it's been super informative. It's amazing. We've chatted about the menstrual cycle in all different capacities over the years, but I feel like this has brought a lot of new insights, and obviously, coming from your experience too, it's really, really valuable. So I love it. If there's listeners who are like, who is this Tammy? She is amazing. I need to see her. I need to know more. I'll make sure that links are in the show notes. But you can find Tammy definitely on socials. But she is with us at the clinic on Tuesdays and Fridays. I didn't have it open in front of me, but that's right. Yeah, Tuesdays and Fridays.
That's right. Yes.
Via telehealth. Tammy actually lives in Sydney too. Which is just another piece of information. Whereabouts? Well, I probably should be giving away your address, but do you live?
I'm in the eastern suburbs.
Eastern suburbs, yeah. Yeah, but thank you so much, Tammy. This has been really, really great.
Thank you for having me.
So as I always say at the end, if anyone has any questions, particularly for Tammy directly, like you can hit us up through socials. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it. It helps other people find the show. And even again, if you've got actually, this is a good time to slow down, take a breath, just stop for like literally 30 seconds, maybe pause the podcast and go and leave us a nice little review and breathe while you're doing it. That would be amazing. But yeah, thank you so much, Tammy. And thank you everyone for listening. And we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.